Welcome to Socializing Security, where every week we have a discussion about security, compliance, and beyond.
Our goal is to learn and grow by socializing each week's topic with each other, our guests, and with you.
A quick compliance note, this podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or regulatory advice.
We're glad you've joined us, and we hope you'll learn along with us.
Welcome back to another episode of Socializing Security. This is Milou, and this is a special edition episode. So I'm going to go back for 2024 and look through all of our amazing, incredible answers from our Socializing Network, our speakers that have joined us over the past year, to answer my favorite question that we pose at the end of every podcast, which is there still really a fight for privacy? And I'll give you the backstory, but about almost a couple years now, I had a CTO tell me that he thought that the fight for privacy was dead and that now it was the fight to security. For me personally, it crushed my soul a little bit, but you'll hear my response in our look back episode with all of our amazing speakers from 2024. So we're really, really excited that we're able to do something like this, and we can't wait to continue to ask the same or similar questions for what's coming this year. Sure, privacy.
Yeah, well, good point. I mean, just the conversations in general that we've had on the podcast, that I've had at work, that I've had even within friend groups that are mostly IT folk, the refining of ideas around privacy, and the fact that forgive the phrase, the normies are talking about privacy more and more, because we are, there's the aspect of, do we really have privacy anymore? The question that you ask at the end of every interview,
which I love, and I'm
we'll
contemplating, do we need to switch it? But it's good.
I've loved all those different answers. Those have impacted how I talk to non-IT people, non-security people, because those perspectives help me to understand how other people think about it. And I've already known that, a lot of family members, they don't think about it at all. Until their credit card gets stolen, they don't think about it at all. And right now, the news is so inundated with the stories of it. Everyone's gotten at least one of those emails that, hey, you get identity protection. We'll help you identify when somebody steals it. Nobody's helping you to prevent it from getting stolen, because we could talk about our society and how penny of prevention, pound of cure type stuff, but the fact that people are aware of it is
listening.
The first step. Yeah, just knowing that is a problem. I may not understand how it is a problem. I may not understand why it's a problem. I may not understand the implications of the problem. But at least now we have that base where we can say, you realize your credit cards could be stolen, your social security number could be stolen, people could do all sorts of things as you. That opens their eyes. And that is the first step of moving forward on those types of things. So I've been to take a negative and turn it into a positive. People are starting to open their eyes and see what's going on there.
I really love that perspective, and I second it for sure, and I agree with it, because I'm definitely, because of the job that I have, when people understand what I do, which I think most people still don't understand what I do for work, and that's totally okay. I wear many hats. It's confusing. But
story of my life.
This is, yes, 100%, we both have this. Suddenly when my friends are like, oh, right, like you're a cybersecurity lawyer, or like, oh yeah, you like manage compliance programs for technology companies, or like, oh, you do security, like whatever, you manage IT. It's suddenly like, they're like, oh yeah, like, what do you think about the TikTok ban? Or what did you think about XYZ thing in the news? Or, oh, did you see this data breach? Like, I'm suddenly noticing people are in my close community are asking more questions to me as like, hey, Milou, you have a podcast about this. Or like, oh, I kind of, and again, I've been talking about stuff like this forever. So this stuff isn't new. It's suddenly I'm getting phone calls from my parents being like, hey, what was that password manager that you really love? Like, who is that? It's 1Pass. They need to join. I need them to come on to the podcast. I'm a really big fan. It's 1Password, the one I recommend. There are other good ones too, but That's the one I love. And, they're calling and are like, hey, what was that again? Like, we want to do that. And so they're listening and they're
Mm-hmm.
hearing what I'm saying, which is exciting because we've definitely had guests come onto the podcast that seem tired because they're like, yes, we've been talking about these security risks for over 10 or 15 years, and now it keeps getting worse. And we're like, it's kind of like we're just watching a train wreck happen, and we've just
Yeah.
all kind of been like, well, we've done the best that we can. And that's kind of like what 2024 felt, especially with the generative AI boom,
Mm-hmm.
because so many compliance, security, privacy, legal, IT, cyber, all of the experts were like, we've been warning you about this. Nobody was taking us seriously, and now it's here. We can't contain it, and it's really scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm very curious to hear where you're going to land on this question because I think you're going to go one way, but I'm very curious if you're going to surprise me. But so a while ago, I had a CTO tell me that he felt like the fight for privacy is dead and that now it's only the fight for security. And we ask all of our speakers the same question just for consistency and cohesivity, but given your background in threat research and your focus on really cybersecurity, I'm very curious, do you think there is still a fight for privacy or is it very much now a fight for security?
That's an interesting question. And I think this question is probably the most nuanced and complicated of the fight between privacy and security.
Just in a quick 2 minutes. Let me just
Yeah, and I think we have made good advancements in both sides, right? We have good advancement in encryption on the security side, if you look at it, good advancements in the encryption, end-to-end encryption with post-quantum quantum computing will have more security. But on the other side, we have also, I believe, we have done good job on managing the privacy as well, right? There are stringent laws, GDPR, others to basically, fighting for privacy. Ever feel that, like I see them as a two sides of the same coin. We cannot have one without the other. And I think we have done some good advancement in both the directions. But I think as, from a research point, I would say that, where we are headed towards is that we'll have to look at privacy and security as a part of our processes, and everything would have to be built on rather than it being an afterthought, right? We always get calls, we say, hey, security built in. Well, I will say security and privacy built into everything that we do rather than bolted on to something, right? So
I love that.
That's my 2 cents on this.
Very well said. Very well
Yeah.
said. I would say mine is very similar, but I would add compliance. but but that's my branch. But yes, 100% agree with you. I think privacy and security, they're two functions, two teams, two missions that really can't, like, there would really be no need for security if there was no need for privacy, right? Like all of the work your team is doing is protecting sensitive systems, which some of them might contain very private information or confidential information. Yeah. I totally agree with your nuanced view. No, I think you had a very, very balanced and wonderful view of that question. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm going to kind of wrap us up and ask my favorite question that I get to do. So we asked the same question and I love the answers because they're always a little different. But a while ago now, I had a CTO tell me that he thought that the fight for privacy was dead and that now is very much the fight for security. And I just would love to get your thought on that. Do you think the fight for privacy is dead? Do you think it's only the fight for security, or do you still think there's some value to that fight?
Man, I think they're different. That's what I think. We experience privacy personally. I don't think we experience privacy corporately. We experience security corporately, so I think that privacy is something that all of us face. If you know somebody that's actually had identity theft, privacy is a big deal. If you get to where your life is messed up for 3 months, it's a big deal, and you will not be convinced that privacy is dead or that the need for it has magically disappeared. But I don't think that corporations have privacy in quite the same way. They have security problems, and most people have limited security problems. I mean, most of us are not running stacks of security inside of our home offices. We've got the same brands of Wi-Fi routers that are available on Amazon as everybody else, but we go into our corporate offices and that security is very real because it's so much broader than privacy. Like, privacy is one part of security, but a corporation, they have to think about these many other things, and it keeps all of us employed, right? In all the different ways that we've been employed in security. None of these jobs are optional. If they were, no one would pay us for them. They're all critically important, and that is the reality of the world that we're in.
I think that's a great answer, and I think I agree with you in the sense that I always say that we're actually really good at our corporate security and we're terrible with our personal security, which really implicates our privacy. I've had many conversations with close friends trying to convince them to use password managers based on the fact that I'm like, where are your credit cards stored? Like, what are we, like, how are you buying stuff on Amazon? Like, and I try to bring it home to them because, like, I've had many conversations just with people because they're like, oh, well, it's so annoying. It feels like work because it is set up properly at work, which is why it feels like work. But it's actually, I'm like, I care way more about my personal credit cards being stored securely than I do about my work stuff. Like, and like, I think all of us feel that way.
Well, it has more immediate damage to your life. It's like, I can't
Right.
buy groceries as
Yes,
opposed to
exactly.
I can't answer email for the next 3 hours.
Oh no. Yeah. Martin, we like to just kind of like round out our guests' interviews with kind of the same question to just get some better consistency. So the question that we normally ask is, I had a CTO recently say that he believes that the fight for privacy is dead and that we are very much now in the fight for security. And I would love to just get your thoughts on that. Do you still think there is a fight for privacy, or is it very much the fight for security now?
It's funny that you told me what somebody else said, so now I'm trying to unseat that. But so I actually somewhat agree, because I think that if, my opinion, especially considering that I used to be really privacy conscious and now I'm kind of getting lazy, and I'm like, well, because it becomes a balance of what's more convenient and what's not. And that's always been, I think, with tech, what the question about privacy was, just before there was focus on privacy, people didn't read terms of service agreements. Nobody still does. At least a lot of places make you scroll to the bottom before you hit agree, but you can just zoop. Anyhow, I think that it's not fully dead, because if you really want to fight for it, you can still try. But with ubiquitous surveillance, so many metrics collection with all the applications you use, whether it's nefarious or not, like developers need those metrics to know how to make their stuff better. Yeah, I don't know if it's fully dead, but for the average consumer, yeah. I don't think it's their focus, and people will hem and haw about it, including myself, and then just kind of shrug their shoulders, and they're like, well, it's really convenient.
You have to be very thoughtful about it in order to have any privacy at this point.
And at that point, you're also probably going to start sacrificing certain stuff in your own life, as people just look at you as a tinfoil hatter and won't deal with you. Or like little things like, I'll go to some store, I didn't know this was even legal, but they're just like, we don't take cash. And I was like, what? I thought you had to. I remember that happened with American Express Bank or something years ago, but more and more storefronts now just won't take cash, which is your last way to pay anonymously. Yeah. I'm not even going to get into cryptocurrency, but
Got another session.
No, I'm good. Anyways,
no.
But my point being is the choices that you used to have maybe 10 years ago to remain a little bit more anonymous. Your car, you don't have a smart car, a car that connect to anything. It's I was having a conversation last night with my friend. I was like, the only thing that's programmable in my house would be the old laptop I use as a game server for my friends. My house is dumb. While he was sitting there debugging why his fridge wasn't working. And I was just I don't want an appliance with an API, man. And honestly, that's because I'm lazy too. It's privacy. Yeah. I don't want my fridge connection to the internet, but also I'm just if it needs to be 2 degrees colder, I'm going to walk over, push down twice, and walk away. I don't
want to have to fix.
It's not. I already have enough to do at work. Yeah.
This is where, as practitioners, we vary widely in our personal risk tolerance for privacy and technology. I think even across the three of us, we would all score very differently.
Yeah, and probably score differently based on what we say versus what we actually do.
Yeah, totally. So, but to your question, Milou, I think that it's there's still some options. I think they are starting to dwindle as more of tech just hooks its way into all of our lives more. I mean, even, when I travel in other countries on public transit, they're like, you could pay for the bus with cash, or you can get a tap card and not hold the line up. And you're like, well, I'm gonna get the tap
Convenience.
card, right? Like,
Yeah.
which is tied to my credit card, so they they know where I bought it. It's like, who cares? So whatever. I'm a tourist. It doesn't matter, right? But it's still, some people might care a little more. So I think it has shifted more to security. Like, how can you do all the things that you need or want to do as securely as possible? Make sure that, we can't control what large corporations and governments do with data, but you can at least try to be secure and not let other nefarious actors go with it. And,
Love it. Let's end there. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, AJ, we do like to always kind of like summarize and wrap up with our guests where we ask the same question to like pull it back a little bit and add some cohesivity between episodes because our topics vary. And so one of the things we have that in common as well. And one of the things that I had a CTO recently say that he felt like the fight for privacy was dead and that now it's really the fight for security. Obviously, given your background in security and intelligence, I think you might have an interesting perspective on this. So where do you feel like we're at for the fight for privacy? Is it still alive and well, or have we really pivoted now and it's the fight for security because we can no longer believe that our information is private?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd be really interested to know who the CTO was. So I actually wrote an article on this, I wrote a magazine article on this, I don't know, a couple years ago now at this point. And the title was something to the effect of "Privacy is Dead." So I think that probably gives you an idea of where I'm going to go with my answer on this. I'm inclined to believe the CTO is probably correct. Now, that does not mean that all of us should go, I'm not going to worry about my privacy. I think it's a bad idea, but I think we're close to being in that position. I've talked about a post-truth world. I've also talked about a post-privacy world. And I think it's a combination of factors. First of all, so many things have been compromised, but there's also a matter of, it's a generational shift. The Gen Z, millennials, they live a more public life by choice. They live on social media. They're, things that, listen, I'm a Gen Xer, things that we wouldn't have done, things that our parents definitely wouldn't have done in public or talked about. It's just everyday occurrence now. There's a generation of people who don't really care about their privacy. Now, they may care later. I think there'll be some regrets down the road, but it doesn't matter by then. It's going to be over. So I think there'll always be some level of privacy. I just think it's gotten to be a much smaller and smaller a bit of data, right? I think people still have skeletons in their closet, but I think the challenges there are because there's less and less of it, even though it's really important. I think people also are less and less focused on security. And ultimately, we may be in a position where there is nothing that's private, and the world's going to be a very open space. And some will say that's great. We'll all be authentic, and everybody will know everything. And those people who say that, I would ask them, do you want everybody to know everything about you? And you don't answer the question, they won't. But the answer is always no. Somebody has something. It might be minor and nothing, by the way, but we're all embarrassed about something in life. So, yeah, I think privacy is more of a concept than a reality at this point. I think most of it's gone. I don't think that means we stop fighting for it. I think it's still a big part of security. I don't think we give up. I do think a lot of things that aren't private, they also just fade away. There's new privacy, right? So if tomorrow you said, I'm going to be a very private person, everything in the world that's out there is out there, but you can stop giving things away. And over time, your life does change. And then you have more privacy as you go. You just have to accept that you've given a lot away. So, there's a chance to come back to it, but privacy is not a priority. Frankly, for the upcoming couple of generations, being out there and, some chase of fame or whatever is a much bigger deal. There's a lot of chasing of the jackpot, of fame, that you have to give up privacy for. So yeah, I mean, the CTO that you talked about, I happen to side with on this, but again, I don't think that means we stop trying. And I think for those who want to be private, you still have an opportunity. You just have to make different choices, and recognize that a choice is everything now. Listen, 30, 40 years ago, you had a secret get out. A dozen people knew about it in your neighborhood. Now a secret gets out, 10 million people around the world, most of whom don't even know you know it. They may not care, but they know it now. And it's just out there and it's forever. So, I think we have to be careful with it, but I just think generationally, it's probably a dying concept at this point.
Yeah, very big generational differences there. That there's a rabbit hole I could go down, but we don't have time for that, unfortunately. AJ, this has been awesome.
Amanda, we like to kind of ask our speakers who join us kind of the same question. I think you'll have an interesting take on this, specifically with your security background, as well as, I'm sure the types of conferences that you're going to, the professionals you're working with. So I had a CTO recently say that he believes that the fight for privacy is dead. and that now we're really, the only hope is the fight for security. I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And do you feel like you agree with that, or you still think there's value in the fight for privacy, or is it really the fight for security at the moment?
I think they are I don't want to say completely two different things, but there's so much difference in being secure versus worrying about privacy. It's almost like the whole compliance versus security argument. Yeah, there's a lot around it. So there's the whole governments getting into privacy and mandating certain privacy acts, and so there's definitely still people fighting for it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any of those mandates. And while I'm not huge on government getting into everything, privacy isn't necessarily a bad thing for them to require. Neither security. But yeah, there's just I don't think it's dead. There's a lot of companies that is a very primary focus. I know everywhere that I have worked, granted, like a lot of that was healthcare, and right now with what I do, we handle a lot of data.
Mm-hmm.
So it's super important. Like it's very important to most companies other than the ones that are profiting off of not having privacy.
Right. So still a valuable fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
Awesome.
the big companies, like a lot of their revenue is due to lack of privacy.
Yep.
Right. As long as that doesn't become the norm.
Yeah. It can definitely cost companies more to be more privacy minded and more security minded for sure.
Right.
Yeah. Both on the cost of business as well as the profit margin.
Yes, so David, I'll be curious to hear this, especially with the story that you shared earlier, specifically of like retailers, like employees, like putting in credit card details directly into notes files. I personally have had issues where like at doctor's offices, I've been asked, they're like, oh yeah, I'll just put your credit card like in your file. And I'm like, no, thank you. Like, and so I've definitely been somebody who's sometimes made my fight for privacy feel more challenging in my like day-to-day life as a consumer. But I had a CTO basically tell me that he felt like the fight for privacy was dead and now it's the fight for security. And based off of your background and what you do in your day-to-day, I would just love to get your take on that. Do you feel like the fight for privacy is dead and we're really just focused on security, or do you think there's still value in the actual fight for privacy?
I think the fight for privacy has rolled into the fight for security because the fight for privacy can't die. If it dies, we're all hosed. But security is a superset of privacy. You have to cover this stuff. And the challenge is you just simply have to have the business buy into the fight. If the business can buy into the fight and they're willing to put the budget behind it to make it happen with the training, the process, the expertise, and arguably the checks and balances of each layer, the security will happen and therefore the privacy will happen. If the business doesn't buy in from the top down, it's game over.
I like that. I like the thought about thinking of security as a part of our entire fight for privacy. It's part of the reason why we do what we do every day is because we are motivated by the basic principles of keeping personal information private if we can. And I think you've spent your life's work doing that. So we appreciate that a lot.
Thank you. Yeah. In my industries, it's, where I've worked, it's been financial data, it's been mass media data, it's been healthcare data, it's been everything in between. And I see it day in and day out. And I want to make it a better place. I don't want people's info out there. And it's got to happen in order for this stuff to continue to work.
Yeah. And knowing a few of your clientele you've had over the years, I think most people listening can directly thank David for some of that privacy they get, because he's worked with some big name brands over the years. So really appreciate your efforts there, David, and for you joining us on Socializing Security. It's been a great conversation. I hope people take databases a little bit more seriously now.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. And if anybody has any questions on this stuff, don't hesitate. Yell as loud as you can in your organization upwards. If it's something's not secure, voice it because they need to hear.
I'm going to go into our last question but I think we definitely could have continued for a while. So we'll wrap up here, but we like to have kind of the same conversation with most of our guests, and we just like to have a little bit of cohesivity between the topics. So one of them is, had a CISO basically say that like they believe that the fight for privacy is dead, and that now it's very much the focus is the fight for security. We've lost the fight for privacy. And so I like to just ask people what their opinions are. That do you think they're still valuable? I'm sure your organization provides both security and privacy training, I'm sure, but do you still feel like there is a fight for privacy, or is it really now for organizations to focus on security?
It's an excellent observation. I definitely think the way we think about data and what's private information to me, my social security number, my health records, my financial records, etc. Yeah, that. I wouldn't say it's dead, but I don't know a better term for it. It's a battle that we'll lose. There's no set of outcomes that we can push into that is more than just trying to control an unstoppable force here when it comes to privacy. So privacy is basically the idea that there's limits to who knows what about what, right? And so, like, I have this little ring around certain bits of data. I think there's synthetic data that is unique to you based on that set of underlying data that we can start crafting our own mental avatars, how we act online, or fingerprints. But I won't go too far out there with that. But I do think that it's going to be a fool's errand to even try to think about security globally with the advent of things like quantum computing. So if the breakthroughs are there with quantum computing, encryption's dead. And if encryption's dead, then what do we even do with that synthetic data? Because even dynamic encryption environments are just going to go into this fractal mathematical understanding of how the world works. So I would say that security, it's going to need to focus on the unique things about unique organizations and individual people. But the full truth of an open internet is that everything will eventually become open.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have to live with that. I think we're going to have to prepare our kids for a world in which everything's open. And so we can fight back. I appreciate companies that fight back right now. The Apples of the world, at least on the local devices, pushing back. I appreciate that policy level.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know a better answer to that, but it's an excellent one, and I wish I was more optimistic on the front for the protection of privacy, and I am not.
I think we're getting like relatively similar responses that we're like, well, we wish, but all of our data has been breached at some point or another from some large enterprise that we do business with. So,
oh yeah, data's. I saw a LinkedIn post today that was hilarious, which was like 23andMe did a payout to like the 30 million records, and they said, and it was like, this guy's like, now we know the cost of your data, and it was like $4.23. Yep. It was like, when you put an insurance number to it, to the amount of records, it's like 23andMe thinks your data was worth $4.23.
Yep.
They created the actuary science around it, and there you go. That's what it's worth today, and the value's going down.
Yeah. No, that's a scary way to think about it for sure, but it's true. I mean, how valuable is my social security number if it's out there on 3 different leak sites? The fourth one is going to be even less valuable. So.
Well, thank you all for listening to that special edition episode of Is the Fight for Privacy Still Dead? We will actually be splitting this into a part 1 and part 2. We're so lucky that we've had such amazing speakers for 2024. And so our Socializing Network is really strong. And so we actually have a whole nother part 2 episode coming up next week with more answers to this apparently controversial, but also very interesting question. So I think we'll keep it for this coming year for 2025. But thank you all so much for listening to Socializing Security. Brian and I both really appreciate your time, and keep listening and continue to socialize with us.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Socializing Security. We hope you learned a thing or two with us.
If you'd like to continue socializing with us on this topic or have feedback, we'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn or social media. Just search for Socializing Security. Or you can email us at info@socializingsecurity.com.
Until next time, stay social and stay secure.